Alright, it's time to talk about this game. And boy do I have some stuff to say about it. Super Mario 3D All-Stars, one of the most hyped up rumored announcements of 2020, just came out around 3 months ago. Regardless, I have a few positive things to say about it, and quite a few more not so positive things to say about it. Don't get me wrong, I love these games to death, and they're still really good to this day for the most part. But the way Nintendo executed this quote-unquote enhanced collection is questionable at best. Let's get right into it. Like I said earlier, I do have some good stuff to say about this game before I run it into the ground. So let's discuss the positives first. First of all, bringing these 3 classic games to the Switch was already a win in itself. You now have the convenience of legally playing these 3 games on the latest Nintendo system that also happens to be portable at enhanced resolutions from the originals. You can't deny that those are objectively net positives. Additionally, I guess there's a music player. For someone who has never owned or played these games before, this may seem like a great option for them to experience them today. And if you didn't know any better, I honestly wouldn't blame you for purchasing it yourself. For the record, I don't blame anyone for purchasing this game. For some people, the positives that I just mentioned will outweigh all of the negatives I'm about to list, and that's completely fine. But if you're like me, and you know that they could have done better, you're going to feel a bit betrayed when you play it for the first time, and that's okay too. However, I've already experienced these games before, and paying the hefty price tag of $60 just for some slightly upscaled emulated ports just doesn't sit right with me. Granted, I still bought the game because I'm a filthy Nintendo consuming maniac, but that's a whole other problem in itself that I'm not willing to address right now. The point is, they could have done so much more with these games, easily. We know that emulation is not this limited. We've seen much better than this. Heck, the first 2 games in the collection don't even run at 60 frames a second. But the newest one does? That simply doesn't make sense to me. Oh, and Super Mario 64 also isn't in widescreen. Why? And sure, you could make the argument that the resolution and frame rate shouldn't matter, and that it's the gameplay that makes the game good. And you would technically be correct. However, these are very simple tweaks to make to these games. They don't involve updating any gameplay elements, graphics, music, or anything. So why not just throw them in? I don't know about you guys, but I sure don't like having large amounts of blank black space around my game that just simply isn't being used. It just looks off, especially on an HD console released a little over 3.5 years ago. I guarantee you that plenty of people will defend these attacks I just made, telling me I'm ungrateful or picky or any other rude insult that may attack my character over a simple video game. But like I said earlier, there are positives to this game that may just be enough for it to be worth it to someone. So it's fine if you bought it and enjoyed it. I'm happy you did. This is simply my irrelevant internet opinion. I'm allowed to have an online echo chamber just like everyone else, right? Anyways, let me show you something interesting real quick. There actually has already been a standard set for these types of remakes that are released on the Switch as I speak. The Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy and Spyro Reignited Trilogy, both being complete remakes of their respective first 3 games with a new engine, updated graphics, music, and quality of life improvements. And on top of all that, retailing for $20 less than Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Let that sink in for a second. Does Nintendo really have such an enormous ego due to the popularity of the character involved in their game that they feel like they don't need to put in as much work and effort as the others, and then proceed to charge even more for it? Yes, Mario is the most popular video game character of all time, but seriously, I feel like it doesn't excuse this. I feel cheaped out, betrayed, and quite annoyed that I actually bought this. But at the end of the day, what difference does it make? Nintendo is the richest company in Japan. They had been completely sold out of Switches for the span of multiple months and had a record-breaking sales year during a global pandemic. A simple boycott would not have hurt their stride in the slightest, whether you think so or not, and that's the saddest thing about this. They got away with selling this to us, and they could probably do it again. They're Nintendo. We are powerless against them, as I'm sure you've noticed from the more recent controversy from them that has been invading gaming news. But even though we may be powerless against them, let me just show you these games running much better than the Switch ports anyways, on a free emulator where all I needed was a dumped ROM from the respective game's system. First up, Super Mario 64, running at 1080p native widescreen, 60 frames per second on the Project 64 emulator. All it took me was one simple patch to my original ROM, and I was able to achieve this performance. This doesn't even have any new graphics or anything, although I can show you some new graphics too. Have a look at the Super Mario 64 PC port, which is a result of all the source code for older Nintendo games being leaked recently. You can legally build this PC port yourself with your own ROM of the game as well, and apply multiple mods to it that enhance the experience even more, such as completely redrawn graphics, models, and other quality of life improvements. Keep in mind that I am still not even suggesting that a new engine be used to remake these games. These solutions are both either run on an emulator of the original game's hardware or using the same exact source code of the original game. Both of these solutions are much less time consuming to produce than the cheaper, cleaner looking, and less scummy remakes of Crash and Spyro. But here I am, stooping down to Nintendo's level of effort, because I just want something at least a little bit better than what we have now. Moving on to Super Mario Sunshine, all we gotta do is run this baby in Dolphin, with one custom mod installed, and that is the UHD texture pack for the game, that replaces the textures in the game with upscaled versions of the originals. I also added a widescreen gecko code, bumped the frame rate up to 60 frames per second, and we're already looking better than the Switch version. It was that easy. These hacks and texture upgrades were made by people in their free time, solely from the passion in their hearts for these games. They weren't paid, they didn't have access to the source code, and they obviously didn't charge you extra for these upgrades. Well, because that would technically be illegal in this case, but that's besides the point. Then we have Super Mario Galaxy. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this one. For an emulated port, it was definitely pulled off much better than the other two games in the collection, running in full HD at 60 frames per second. Obviously, Galaxy 2 wasn't included in this collection, and I've heard countless theories as to why they didn't include it. However, I personally don't think that the reason they left this one out was laziness. There was something internally at Nintendo that happened that may have had it removed from the roster. Whether it be time constraints, control issues, or some other weird theories I've heard, such as them simply not wanting to include the game because of how stressful and draining the original development was. The whole point I'm trying to make here is that I know that Nintendo could have done much better with just a slightly higher amount of effort. I feel like these games were disserviced with these ports. Considering the back of the game's box says that they are enhanced for the Nintendo Switch system, you would think that these games would be up to par with at least the resolution and frame rate of most Nintendo Switch games, but sadly, that's not the case. And honestly, I could keep going on and on about this game, even venturing into the conversation of whether or not they should have remade at least one or two of the games from the ground up. Which definitely would have also been nice, but I'm not going to, because that's not really my point here. My point is that Nintendo cheaped out on cheaping out. These are emulated ports with very little put into them in the realm of enhancements, with a $60 price tag slapped onto them. Granted, if you were to actually purchase physical versions of each of these games for their original systems, they would total well over $60. So I guess that is one more positive thing about this game, but not really enough to make it worth it for me. What do you guys think though? Do you think it was acceptable for Nintendo to release this game at full price? I'd like to hear what you think in the comments below. Also, if you notice that today's video is a bit shorter than usual, it's because I'm experimenting with putting out smaller videos in between my longer ones in order to keep a more steady content output. More longer content is on its way, with continuations of previous series and the beginning of one or two new ones, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching guys, peace out.